A teenager who stabbed and killed a classmate after she refused his invitation to the junior prom was sentenced to 25 years in prison yesterday. The plea deal seemed to leave both sides unhappy. The defense says the boy's psychosis is what led him to do the crime, but the parents of the victim say the lenient sentence sends the message that it is okay to kill in Connecticut. So this gentleman's name is Christopher Plaskon. He's 19 now, but he was 16 years old at the time of the killing. And he had pled no contest back in March for the murder. The murder actually took place on April 25th, 2014. That was the day of prom, and he murdered 16-year-old Maren Sanchez. So it's interesting because up until this point, there's been kind of a back and forth, and there obviously was no trial involved, but both sides are pretty unhappy with what came out. So it was determined that he would be sentenced to 25 years in jail. But Connecticut law, there's a new legislation. It's called the Second Chance Society, and it's basically calling for a change in the way that minors are treated, or minor felons are treated. And so if he serves 60% of this sentence, it's possible that he could face parole. He's already served 2 years, so that means what it boils down to is he could get out of jail in 13 years. So we'll get into some of the details, but what do you think just hearing that?
Right, so obviously it seems to be, on the one aspect, he would, because of his age, I think, is the issue, and there's a time cap on it of only 20, but of 25 years, and because of his age, it's conceivable he could get out whilst he's still a young man, and so that causes outrage and difficulty and consternation for people. The fact that he would be out before his 40th birthday would mean that, that would cause a problem, particularly for a lot of people, and not the least of which would be the victim's family.
Sure, absolutely. Well, and so of course his age had something to do with it, but there was also, his lawyers confirmed that he was dealing with issues of psychosis. Even Sanchez, the victim, she had been friendly with Plaskon and had told guidance counselors that he was very suicidal, or talking about hurting himself. He would bring steak knives to school and cut himself, etc. So even though this particular case is terrible, the idea of someone turns you down for prom and then you murder them, but I think the bigger implication is the fact that the school system didn't protect her, because if the idea is that you're supposed to go to your guidance counselor for these things, but they don't do anything and then you end up murdered, that's kind of the bigger issue here. And even her family is filing a lawsuit against the school system, as well as Plaskon and his family. Yeah, so, and according to Sanchez's father, he believes that this kind of sends the message that it's okay to kill, because he's a minor, and because eventually he'll be able to get out with a college degree and everything. But I honestly say this was a very compelling story to me, and I'm very mixed, because I acknowledge the fact that juveniles or young people, your brain is continuing to develop well into your 20s. So I do think that certain crimes committed by youths should be treated differently. At the same time, we're talking about murder, so it's this very strange back and forth I even have with myself. I don't really. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it is a hard one to call in terms of, but at the end of the day, he committed murder, and so he has to be held accountable for that. He's clearly psychologically disturbed, and he can be put into an appropriate facility. But to be able to, if you just put yourself in the victim's shoes, or in the family's victim's shoes, the fact that he's got a young developing brain is of no consequence to me. The same argument you could run with someone who was drunk behind the wheel of a car. You could say, well, I didn't, there was no intent there. I didn't even realize I was over the limit. But that is a liability. There's a rule in law whereby it's not a defense to say that I didn't realize I was over the limit.
Sure.
I didn't, So I think similarly here, we can't be, as much as you want to have understanding for his actions, he has to be held accountable for it, and we have to have a society where, there's enough adherence is enough of a deterrent.
Absolutely, and I would never justify like, oh, he was 16, so that justifies why he's doing this. I think when you're talking about these really long sentences, because for example, in Connecticut, generally the maximum penalty for murder is about 60 years. So 25 is obviously much less than that. He could potentially be up for parole in 13. That doesn't mean that he's going to be granted parole. It just means that he has the potential for that. So I think that's where I get a little bit dicey, because I do think these really long sentences are not necessarily the way to deal with them either. But we will see how it plays out. He's currently being held in a youth institution in Cheshire, and he's going to stay there until he's about 22, and then he'll move into general population. So in the meantime, also Maren's, the victim's mother, is starting a foundation for her in her daughter's name to help young girls that are being psychologically or physically abused by people. So we'll keep tabs on how this pans out, but this is just the latest in the teenage prom day killing.